Hello, everyone. I'm excited to have Jess Almlie with me today, who is this phenomenal L&D, learning and development, leadership development, organizational development leader. And she's got a podcast and a book coming out. So we're going to talk about respect in that context. Jess, over to you. Please introduce yourself to everyone. Let's dive in. Let's dive in.
Sounds great. Well, hello, everyone. Jess Almlie, as Bobby said. I've been working primarily in the people development professions in some way, shape, or form now for over 30 years. Everything from trainer, orientation coordinator, LMS administrator, facilitator, program manager, all the way up to vice president of learning. And I left my corporate gig a couple years ago and went out on my own. Very, very passionate about this industry that we love, this people development industry, moving forward, making a difference, and all the things we need to do and change in order to make that happen. So my podcast is L&D Must Change, and I interview thought leaders who are calling for change in a lot of different ways, big and small. There's always practical takeaways. And then my book is L&D Order Taker No More, Become a Strategic Business Partner.
Love it, love it, love it. Lots of confetti going off right now. I'm so excited. I can't wait for your book. And this will launch right around when your book comes out. So I'm very excited to do that and learn from you. So just, yeah, let's go right into how do you define respect in that context, right? In the world of people and culture and L&D, how would you define respect in the workplace?
Yeah, I think about respect, and I did think about this ahead of time before you and I started to chat a little bit, so I could have some thoughts in my head. And really, to me, it's about valuing people for who they are and the perspective and expertise that they bring to the table. And that we acknowledge and involve them in projects and work and whatever it is that we're doing with those things in mind first and foremost. I also think, and this bubbled up particularly during COVID times when I was leading a large team, that acknowledgement that people need to be acknowledged that they are human, especially in hard times or in the midst of change, when there's a lot of life circumstances, emotions, all of these things are bubbling up. And so those kind of things, those two things are the way that I primarily think about respect in the workplace.
Love it. Very crisp. And what's coming up for me is, I often say to leaders, soft skills are the hard skills. And so let's clarify, respect is not a soft thing. It's actually really hard work, and it takes real dedication, commitment to do that. And it doesn't, I love the COVID example. I use it all the time. And what I say to environments, especially in manufacturing, right? They did not have the luxury of saying, hey, everybody's knowledge worker and you can work remote. It was very complex. There were big business decisions to make on how do you keep manufacturing going and how do you keep people safe. So where I'd love us to go, Jess, is using that, playing still on that experience we all had, is that balance between business results and human-centric ways of leading. Say more about that.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you one. Maybe there's two kind of different angles I'll take with this. The one is I'll tell the story of where this realization came from. I like to think that I always do treat people as humans. I grew up in a very large family. We were very diverse. In fact, I'm the oldest of 10 siblings, and six are adopted from all different countries. And so this is the life I grew up in. And my mother and father were always having refugees stay in our home. So we just a lot of life experience happening there. And so I've always thought about that, but I never really, as a leader, I think it was so ingrained in me. I hadn't really thought about it as much until COVID happened. Now, I did something with my team on a regular basis. About every couple years, we would do an team expectation setting activity. And what that would mean is I would ask the team basically three questions. And we first did it in person, and then in COVID, we did it virtually. But the questions were this: what makes a good team member? What makes a good person in your role, so to do your function well? And then, in your opinion, what makes a good leader? And we took all of the answers from the people in our team and kind of compiled them, looked for trends, and then that's how what we used to set expectations. So they were setting the expectations of for themselves what a good team member looks like and acts like. And for us as leaders, for myself and then the other managers on the team, it was what do we expect from our leaders? During COVID, something interesting happened. A brand new theme emerged, and that theme was we expect and would really like from our leaders to see us as humans who are having a hard time, in addition to workers who need to be productive. And I don't think that this is something that wasn't present before COVID. I just think with all of the change and set and everything that was happening in our lives that it became more obvious to people that that's what they needed. And so when I started to think about that, we wrote that into our team expectations. We had regular conversations about what that meant and looked like. Because as a manager, as a leader, there's this really tricky balance, I think, between holding people accountable and also giving them grace and understanding when things are tough. And it isn't just an L&D leader that struggles with that. It's our leaders all throughout the organization. And so we started to talk about that and helping our teams within the organization to do similar expectation setting exercises. So that's maybe one route that we go with human-centered respect, if you will.
Oh, very powerful. Thank you. Let me first acknowledge where you opened there, Jess. Thank you for sharing about your upbringing and 10 kids and lots of adopted siblings. My wife and I have 3 adopted kids. All our kids are adopted, foster to adopt. So not, immigrants, but yeah, just quite a journey, and it's very humbling. And to me, it ties with respect and what we're talking about with L&D around that reminder about always challenging my conventional beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And how I can, and I think that's what COVID did, right? Like it wasn't business as usual and never has been actually. And with VUCA, right, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, COVID was sort of a neutralizer that actually woke everybody up. And I don't know of any example of a corporation that did not show up in a good way. I've always seen tremendous resilience and fortitude, and how, there were huddles, leaders met first thing in the morning, triaged, what they knew, how they navigate, and course corrected. And then coming back to what you're talking about, creating those norms, I love the way you describe that, because what you laid out is such a human-centric design around listen to the people. You may agree or disagree as a leader. You may not be able to say yes to everything, but then converge, right? So there's diverge with lots of ideas and funnel it down into converging to what you can apply. So say a bit more about that, around the benefits of that approach, Jess, in terms of, because now let's explore how does good respect, what does it look like? And how do you know when it's present in a company culture?
Yeah, so I've always been somebody who's very keen on collaborative leadership, if you will. And to me, collaboration is very different than cooperation. Because I think we can very often throw around we are collaborative, and sometimes we're not. It's very misunderstood. Cooperation is very transactional. So that's I do my part, you do your part, Bobby, and we snap the pieces together. We call it good to go. True collaboration means that we are tapping into the expertise and background and perspective of everyone in that room, and we're creating something on the outset that we would have never created alone and in and of by ourselves. And when it comes to both leadership and partnership across the organization, I am looking to my team and those who I'm working with to be that truly collaborative partner. And part of that means recognizing the skills and expertise and perspectives that each person is bringing. That's what it looks like. But part of it also means that we allow some space for co-creation. Because in that co-creation, if we're doing this correctly and we really are valuing and bringing in all those different perspectives and creating something we couldn't have created before, that is respecting, and it gets us a better outcome, I believe, on the onset. So my strategy has always been, let's create the banks of the river as a leader. So here's the vision, here's the direction we're going, here's kind of some of our core values or whatever it is that we're going to ground ourselves in. But then the direction we swim within that river, we're going to create that together. Because if I bring you into the project, now we're just amplifying that respect, we're amplifying that trust, we're amplifying the ability for us all to bring in our expertise, and we come out with a better result. So that is a way that I have always approached leadership, both with my team and with my partners throughout the organization, the other stakeholders that I'm working with on a regular basis.
I love it. Banks of the river. My gosh, what a fantastic metaphor for what you're describing, because I definitely have similar beliefs. And around co-creating, again, I think like soft skills, that's another one that's a bit of a misnomer. It gets relegated into a soft sort of thing. Again, the way you're describing it is very practical, very tangible, very business oriented. And the collaboration definition you shared to me really reminds me again of teaming from Amy Edmondson, right? Very much about truly sinking in. And let me also clarify, I think we'll be aligned on this, but just to check, that accountability still happens with one person, right? That the buck has to stop. Like when you do that long list of actions that need to happen to get something done, a team can't get, can't be on that line item as this team will get it done. It's a person. It's just very clean and crisp accountability. And what I like to call accountability, I know we use the term holding people accountable. To me, as adults, we support each other. So to me, that really relates with co-creating, which means, yes, I sign up for something with you, for instance, Jess, and commit to doing something by a certain date. And the agreements that most, I think, healthy organizations have is I would know to come to you in advance of that deadline if I need to renegotiate it. That to me is support accountability because I have the sensitivity, the power, the ownership to say, oops, I'm not going to be able to make it. I'm not going to ask for mea culpa later. I'm going to actually readjust this and see what would work for you and for me so that I'm not throwing you a curveball at the last minute, right? Are we aligned on that?
We really are. One of the things, again, if I'm going to go back to really what makes true collaboration work, there are defined roles within true collaboration. Everybody is responsible for different pieces, even if what we're co-creating at the end brings all of our expertise together. I can tell a story when I inherited a team of 27 people during a reorg at one point. And there was one part of the team that they were responsible for training in our operations division. And they were all doing all the things. So that was great in some ways, right? But we had a performance issue on the team. And because there was nobody really was accountable for anything on their own, it was really easy for that person to slip through the cracks and not be accountable, not be held accountable by their team because somebody else would always pick up their slack, right? And so not that the reason that we have accountability is for performance issues, but the problem was that was bringing down the whole team now because they couldn't collaborate well because they didn't have clear definitions of how to be successful within that team because they were all responsible for all the things. And so we needed to divide up the responsibilities so that people could work together, holding each other accountable, supporting each other to your point, but at the same time being able to own their own work and be successful in that. So that is one of the ways that I think about collaboration isn't a soft skill. It isn't a weak skill. In fact, it's very difficult to do well, and it involves some kind of harder things like accountability.
I love that. Yes. You know what I'm also hearing in that you've just reminded me of something I learned from my CMO, Chief Marketing Officer at Microsoft, which was she taught me how not to boil the ocean. So to me,
Mm,
that's another form of respect in leadership is when I can be, if I'm in a power position, can recognize that I'm asking something of people and thinking about the implications and what's already on their plate and how they're going to juggle things to prioritize. I mean, come on, we're living in an epidemic of burnout. And I believe that a hard and true way of truly having a respectful culture is yes, you still have to get things done, but it's about how a leader can help prioritize things so you can juggle things around, right?
absolutely. I like to call it strategic prioritization, even.
Yes.
So, how do we prioritize the right things? Because there's always going to be more work than we can ever do, right? There's always more requests, there's always more work than there are resources in most cases. And so, how do we prioritize strategically in such a way that, as a leader, sets our team members up for success, not burnout?
Love it. Love it.
Mhm.
So, Jess, as we wind down here, how about your top tips for the audience on how to cultivate respect in the workplace?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I mean, number one, this one, I say this to people and I almost feel silly saying it because it seems so simple, but yet it can be so hard to do. And that is just follow through on your promises. And I can't tell you the number of times I had a team member that didn't follow through on a small promise and then was frustrated when they had a bigger ask and whomever they were asking didn't necessarily respect that was a legit ask, if you will. So big and small. If I say I'm going to get back to you by Friday, I'm going to get back to you by Friday. Even if I don't have the answer you need, I'm going to say, "Hey, I'm on it. I just want you to know I'm working on it." Because if you can't build respect for the big things until you first have that trust for the small things. That is really my top most simplest tip, whatever it takes to do that. The other thing I think is just if there's a way we can figure out, I like to call it the genius of others and tap into that strategically. That helps us in our partnerships and trust in such in a huge way. I mean, I had one stakeholder I worked with, and she was just so difficult. She was a tough nut to crack, if you will. I couldn't quite seem to get to this partnership level with her. And then I thought, but wait a minute. She's good at her job for some reason. She's in this role for some reason. What is it? And then we were placed on my break came when we were placed on a high level, high intensity project together, and I saw it. All of a sudden, I saw that she advocated for her team like no one else, and she was extremely protective of the customer experience. That was where her genius was. So now when I approach a partnership with her, I'm looking at it like, how can she help me? This is where she thinks about all day, every day. How can we pull that in? And once we started to do that, our relationship started to shift, where I respected what it was that she was bringing to the table, what she was so good at, instead of just looking at all the reasons that I was frustrated with working with her. So that's another one. Those are maybe two. One, a little easier, just follow through on your promises. And two, try to find out what that person's genius is, why they're good at the job, and then tap into that strategically whenever possible.
Oh, Jess, they're simple and not easy to follow. So that first one, especially, right? It's such a no-brainer, and I see it broken all the time. I hate it when people say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I messed up," or missed that. After the fact is not the point, and the point is before the deadline, right? I'm a big stickler for that. Well, Jess, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. We could go on forever, but I do want you to give a shout out for your book and your podcast. Tell the audience a bit about what you're passionate about with both those great outcomes, products you have out there.
Yeah, for sure. So the podcast is called L&D Must Change. And I am interviewing, as I said, thought leaders in the industry who are calling for us to change in big and small ways. But I'm also very much a stickler for there needs to be a practical action that comes out of that. So we always end with at least one practical step you can take, because I believe the only way that we're going to change is if we are all working on it together in small ways. It can't be just one person. So that's the podcast. The books, L&D Order Taker No More, Become a Strategic Business Partner. That is really, it's my story from being able to move my team from a place where we were very transactional to one where we were able to work as strategic business partners in lockstep with the business. And once we got there, I thought, why doesn't everyone work this way? But yet, when I was trying to make that shift, I didn't really have any resources to help me. So I wrote it to be the handbook I never had in order to help others to make that same shift themselves. So that's a little bit about both. You can find the podcast anywhere you listen to a podcast, Spotify, Apple, all of those places. You can find the book anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and it is published by ATD Press. So if you're an ATD member, you can hop on the ATD website and get it for a discount there as well.
Fantastic, Jess. Congratulations on both. What a contribution you're making, right, to the world, not just the L&D profession. Can't wait for the book to come out, and I can see us getting back together maybe later in the year to hear what you're hearing about the book and the impact you're having. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you all who watched. Until next time.
Thanks. Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, everyone. It was a joy to be here with you today.